the man of the hour himself, Hunter, folks. How's it going tonight?
Right. Hello, everybody. Sorry for being a little late. I am a fully employed individual, and work was very busy today. So,
Okay, so Hunter, the joke with that, by the way, it just triggered in my mind. Anytime you're on like an Instagram reel or a TikTok video, and there's some drama from a content creator or somebody who's exclusively on social media or something, people will always have some version of the comment, "Big news for the unemployed."
yeah.
So I kind of find that funny. It's like, yeah, you're right. Like, I have no idea what any of this stuff means, but I'm sure some people who follow along pretty closely are having the time of their lives right now.
Yeah, something like that. Oh my gosh. All right.
Anna says W2 flex.
Oh boy. No, it's called I pay taxes. It's awful.
You ain't kidding. I might be switching careers here. It's a
Uh-oh.
joke, by the way. But well, I mean, kind of a joke. So they went from before we get started, I know people are going to be wildly interested in this, but they had previously changed the reporting requirements for gambling income so that you only got to write off 90% of your losses. So it used to be you write off all your losses against all your profits, right? And then whatever's
Right.
left over at the end is how much money you actually made, then you pay taxes on that. You get absolutely raked over the coals, but you pay taxes on that. So it was possible to be a professional poker player or whatnot.
Mhm.
Well, they changed the law just recently, or at least they've proposed changing the law. I don't know if it's actually gone through or not, but they are making it so you only get to claim 90% of your losses, not 100%, which would essentially make it so that nobody could be a professional sports gambler or poker player or anything like that overnight. But then Trump came out and he, in wild, bombastic Trump fashion, in response to people getting angry about that, said, "How about we just eliminate paying taxes on gambling winnings at all?" So
Oh boy. Oh no.
if there's a tax
Oh
loophole where
no.
you could just if there's a tax loophole where you could just play poker without actually paying any taxes, I might have to strongly consider that, and I'm sure Trey might have to as well.
That's bad. Guys, don't gamble. That's bad advice.
No taxes though.
Yeah,
No
no
taxes.
taxes. But I feel like you're gonna lose more to just being bad than by taxes.
All right, Hunter. So I've already primed the pump, talked a little bit about upslope regimes and how they can be a little bit tricky compared to forecasting in the lower elevations of the plains or the Midwest.
Mhm.
Told people that you are located out of Denver, Colorado, so that's an area where you end up chasing a lot is upslope regimes. So if you wanted to just start off at the highest possible level, why is it that an upslope regime is different? And I guess just what is an upslope regime? What's a regime period? I know that's a word that might not be in a lot of people's meteorological lexicons.
Sure. Yeah, no, this is a I want to say it's a non-traditional type of storm chasing target that an individual can go after on a storm chase. That being said, just because they're non-standard does not mean that it does not produce exceptional results. Um, the number one, at least for me in my life, and the poster child of my storm chasing career is obviously going to be Simla. And if you know anything about me and how many times I talked to Gabe about this, that one will forever be the poster child of my life. So Simla, Colorado, back in 2015 is a great example of this, or even just a lot of Colorado, Wyoming, kind of these higher elevation locations tend to have what are called upslope regime type storm chases. And it simply is just air being funneled upslope, up the elevation. And so it's nothing too complicated, but why it works and some of the particular setups that we look for that generally produce really good tornadoes and supercells can be a little tricky because they often feel a little backwards and they often coincide with a planes risk already ongoing. So a lot of people just tend to stay with the planes risk due to various reasons of they're already out there, they live nearby, it might look flashier on convective models. So those are things that kind of play into those roles. So it tends to be more locals to the high plains, tend to chase them more often. But sometimes that is the only play to go for, and you will end up chasing those out in the eastern Colorado plains, sometimes into New Mexico, Wyoming, and even as far north as Montana as well, where you get those higher elevations, you get up that escarpment up to the higher plains. Basically, the biggest thing with upslope regimes is you're looking for moisture funneling up the hill, right? Upslope. You want it to go up the hill. And the reason for that, there's a couple meteorological benefits that you get that the plains don't necessarily have an advantage over. And it's purely because you're higher up in the atmosphere. There is a lower overall pressure in the atmosphere around you, naturally, because you're higher up than compared to areas near sea level. So, what this does is it helps things behave a little bit differently. The rules don't exactly behave the same way as they do in the plains. The number one thing that we are probably going to talk about is going to be dew points and how that plays a role in chasing the upslope, because again, it feels very backwards, as well as we'll get into what creates the upslope, what's the favorable type of pattern, whether it's at the surface and aloft as well. What does that look like? And so we'll get into some specifics as well. So I am also flying a little bit at the seat of my pants for this. So, the best way to coach is at the seat of your pants. So let me open this up because I can talk about a couple examples.
Yeah, and while you're pulling that up, I think the biggest mental hurdle that I have to overcome when I think about upslope flow is that sort of strange inverted way that millibars work, in that you get less millibars the higher you go up in the atmosphere, and that means that there's less pressure that is actually being exerted on you. And because there's less pressure, that means the air doesn't have to be as saturated before it actually condenses and forms a funnel. And so it's kind of difficult sometimes for me to conceptualize why 60 joules per kilogram of cape gets the job done when you might need 70 to get it done somewhere else.
Exactly. Yeah. It just feels a little backwards. So we're gonna talk about I'm gonna try to see if I can do this, because this is gonna be the best way to like walk through this, is just have a little bit of fun with paint and play around a little bit. So let me get this going. I just need a this will work.
And let me know if I need to change any settings so that you can screen share.
Yeah. I will definitely be screen sharing here in just a second. Um,
I have all the
Let's see
settings
if-
in place, so he's a moderator in here, so he can do whatever he wants.
ooh, so much
Awesome.
power.
Thank you, Anna.
So much power.
This is why Anna is the top goober at Storm Chaser Coaching, by the way. That's her role. We actually named her chat room at the company in our work chat. We named it Top Goober. So
Amazing.
It's a role I wear with pride.
Perfect. Okay, let's see. Everyone can see this. This is a really nice, beautiful map of the United States, because this is the best way to explain how this stuff kind of works visually. And we're going to talk about how we can spot this off of fronts, because this is going to be the number one driver of things. So, and everyone can see this? Yes? Good. Chat? Cool. All right. So, biggest thing is we're going to point out here is the upslope regime is going to be pretty much held to this zone here. So like I was talking about, this is going to be the higher plains of New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, a little bit of Nebraska, and the Badlands, as well as Rapid City, all the way up into Montana. This zone is just butted up right up against the Rocky Mountains. So this is kind of creates this very niche zone. Not very many places like it in the world, and especially not anywhere anywhere like it in the United States either. It's a very niche location that is commonly frequently showing in the atmosphere in EML, because we're extremely close to the higher terrain, so that stuff easily advects over the plains. So we almost always have EMLs. So that means a lot of dry air. So in order to get convection, we need moisture. We need some way to get that moisture up here. So oftentimes, if you look on weather maps, like weather maps in general, you'll see probably a low pressure system. You'll see a warm front draped out over here. And then generally you'll see some type of, let me get a different color. we'll do this, some type of dry line mix down here, and you'll get a general cold front kind of arced out like this, out here back across the plains. And you would expect, hey, the general traditional target is, hey, I'm looking at this. Seems like we're getting the right instability and moisture. Maybe I'll target here up against the low here in Nebraska and Iowa. Maybe I'll play the risky, more conditional threat here down along the panhandles for some more dry line action, both of which are plenty fine targets and produce several tornadoes. But the upslope regime is going to be this backwards type of thing here along this cold front and actually behind the cold front. So, getting into this a little bit, generally, as we know, winds around low pressure centers in the United States will rotate counterclockwise, like this. So that's how air, at least at the surface, rotates around a center of low pressure. And when moisture funnels up here from the Gulf of Mexico, that's actually a bad color. Let me actually just use yellow. So moisture kind of funnels up here into the low pressure, sometimes, and oftentimes in the late summer when there's just copious amounts of moisture, whether it's from the ground moisture, existing rainfall the day before, or just even moisture from the synoptic system advecting into the region. Sometimes this moisture can get funneled in and tucked in behind your surface low pressures. So oftentimes you'll get this zone of 40s and 50 dew points here tucked in behind cold fronts, which feels a little backwards, but it actually gets more moist as a cold front advects over, which is really fun because what does that do? At the surface, this creates what is called upslope. And we're going to delete all this, and we're going to zoom in a little bit. So, really horrible pixelated thing. I hope everyone can see that. We'll box this. This is Colorado here, so for everyone can see kind of where we're looking. Generally, when you get these cold fronts, they will, in two parts. Sometimes they'll push all the way to the south and push all the way through, and you'll get usually winds out of the northeast on the back side of this. Sometimes, if you're really lucky, this cold front actually stalls out kind of along the Palmer Ridge, which is one of my favorite places to chase. It could stall out over the Raton Mesa, maybe even the Cheyenne Ridge or whatnot, but usually it gets to about this Palmer area. And what happens as the sun comes out, especially if you get these overnight cold fronts, which are pretty common, these cold fronts, whether they're outflow boundaries from existing storms out here over the plains or just synoptic cold fronts, they'll just kind of meander their way into the Denver area, and you'll get this really nice fetch of almost dewy easterlies. And for those who are a lot more familiar with hodographs and skew-T examples, anytime you can strengthen your easterlies at the surface, you will enlarge that low-level hodograph, right? Because we're looking at this zone here. This is a terrible color for that. I apologize. Let's do red. You'll get that larger low-level hodograph because it lengthens the hodograph as this vector and this upslope gets stronger and more easterly, if that makes sense. So it's really common in Colorado, and I'd say probably actually Wyoming down here into New Mexico. This zone here, where you'll get a lot of these very long 0 to 3 kilometer hodographs that tend to be very, very favorable for well-ventilated supercells. And if you get some decent curvature and right movers, you tend to get very efficient tornado production, because what is another thing the high plains are really great for? And I've already mentioned it. An EML, lots of dry air. What does that mean? Lots of dry air and very warm but saturated air, or excuse me, not saturated, but moist air that's very, very hot, develops steep lapse rates. You get low-level cape that multiple people have talked about, and that creates lots of vertical stretching with the atmosphere. So you combine that with a lot of venting through that important layer in the hodograph, you'll get very, very clean looking supercells. And the high plains tend to also create a lot of these very crunchy, very convective looking thunderstorms, because there's not a lot of sin, because all of the sin is in a layer that is not convecting any thunderstorms. So you get these just very convective, crunchy looking thunderstorms, as I like to say. And they tend to be very photogenic because most of these storms are well ventilated. All the precip is being advected away from the storms. So these types of setups can get very particularly fun. And for example, if I actually want to go to the Chase archive.
And while you're looking that up real quick, Hunter, you mentioned the exceptional stretching just due to the atmospheric dynamics.
Yes,
Is that the reason why we see a lot of land spouts out there as well?
absolutely. Because the biggest thing that generates a tornado, in my opinion, is any way you can vertically stretch a parcel of air. If you can spin it and pull it, basically vertically, right? And in Colorado, the high plains, you tend to get a lot of these steep lapse rates. Steep lapse rates are basically how fast does the atmosphere cool with height. If your atmosphere, generally like a good base mark is about 7 degrees Celsius per kilometer as you go up in the atmosphere. So if you go up a kilometer and you've cooled more 9 to 10 degrees Celsius, that is extremely unstable and the atmosphere will want to stretch very efficiently. If you're sitting more of like a 6.0 or a 5.0 degrees Celsius per kilometer, so it cools at 5 or 6 degrees Celsius as you go up, your atmosphere is going to be a lot more sluggish. It's going to struggle to raise parcels of air. You're going to need a lot of outside lift, not just the supercell itself, to lift that air. So you can get a lot of land spouts in Colorado because you can get a lot of this stretching potential, and you don't even need a supercell. This stuff happens off of boundaries, anywhere you get surface convergence along two opposing wind fronts, and just enough heating in the right spot. Any updraft, even just a basic cumulus cloud, not even a thunderstorm, can produce a land spout. And so, very common out here over the eastern high plains.
Yeah,
So,
I feel like the quintessential image that I have when I think of Colorado tornadoes in particular, but I suppose this is true for anywhere where those same dynamics are at play, is you have just like a random neighborhood with like people outside mowing a lawn or just like, playing catch or something, and then there's just a crazy land spout in the background. And a lot of that is it's, at least tell me if I'm wrong here, but it seems to me that's because you have otherwise sub-severe conditions, especially at the ground, but you
mhm.
have those dynamics that are happening in the atmosphere that just allow enough stretching for those updrafts to turn into those monstrous land spouts that don't seem particularly violent, but they're just so picturesque. And so you get those really sort of, I don't even know what to call them, but it's very surreal. A lot of the images that you get of these just huge, towering, beautiful land spouts with like people going about their business in random neighborhoods or grocery stores and stuff like that.
It's always a running joke that if you never book a plane flight out of DIA in Denver, anytime around July, because you can roll the dice on a land spout running across the tarmac, and it does happen enough that they put tornado shelters all in the airport because it happens enough. That was like a naturally occurring zone where the geography of Colorado naturally favors a zone of spin, generally over where the airport is. And which was genius, by the way. So let's build an airport there.
I was gonna
And
say, like, what a wonderful idea to put an
I
airport where
know.
there's.
So the Denver airport has a much higher chance of being hit by a tornado than arguably any other airport in the U.S. Maybe second to, I don't know, some airport in Birmingham and Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or Norman, Oklahoma City, because there's just so much potential for an easy land spout to just occur in the area. So jumping back to this, because this is a really good example. I've mentioned it before. This is the Simla 2015 case, and for those unfamiliar, this is from the Chase Archive, another project that I'm affiliated with, and this is just such a really great tool to use in your ability to use reanalysis and just get your hands dirty with some data. And
real quick there, Hunter, are you sharing your screen right now?
Yes.
So it says the stream has paused your screen because you minimized the application. So just wanted to give you a heads up.
Good to know. Oh, that's right. I minimized the application, not the screen. That makes sense. Got it.
Perfect. There you go.
We got it. Everyone can see. Yep. Lovely.
Yep, it's back on there now.
Cool. All right, everyone. Anyways, like I said, Chase Archive, really great place if you want to get into some data from past events and look at some really fun stuff. You can see social media posts. You can see soundings, which we'll kind of get into, and radar satellite upper air data from that day as well. So really cool project. Highly recommend spending your time, especially for those wanting to really develop your skills as you learn here from the Chase, the Storm Chaser coaching. Spend some time in here. This will really aid you. And I'm personally affiliated with this project as well, so I highly recommend it. But this is a radar loop, actually, of that supercell that I chased back in 2015. It starts here out over the eastern Colorado plains, over the Palmer Divide. And you can see what happens here is that you get a supercell that actually blows up on that stalled cold front, and then the storm follows it southward with time and just becomes this absolute monster. You can see just this beautiful supercell here. It produces, I think my last count was 23 tornadoes. Most of them were weak and brief, but a few of them were exceptionally spectacular, with 2 of them being twins at the time and very large, photogenic, very beautiful tornadoes to chase. And we love that over the eastern Colorado because there's nothing out there for them to hit. So it's basically enjoying getting your cake and eating it and don't have to worry about any damage or generally injuries or fatalities. So it's basically a win-win situation. But another reason why I want to pull this up is we just mentioned, right, those type of that synoptic pattern, right? Like what does that look like at the surface? We talked about different fronts and everything, and I think I'm going to have to share my screen again to show this. So we'll stop streaming, and we'll just do the entire screen because this is getting annoying instead of just the application. There we go. So now I can draw on this. So what we see here, this is a beautiful example of a very strong upslope regime. What we see here, and I'm just going to draw a line of constant dew point of about 60 degrees dew point here. And we see here, we kind of follow along, go to about where 60-degree dew point is, somewhere in here, gets up this way, and then back up this way. And we see everything pretty much over here in the eastern Colorado Plains is just funneling into the upper slope terrain here in Colorado. So this is pure dew release. We're talking, 10 to 15 knots here at the ground. That is exceptional low-level mass response, as well as, look at these dew points. These type of dew points here in Colorado are exceptional. If you're out chasing and you have clear skies and dew points in the 60s with easterlies, go chase Colorado because something cool is going to happen. I also see Stefan posted a really cool picture of the anticyclonic tornado from the Simla day. That is a real tornado, by the way. I saw that also. That is an absolute real tornado, not a 3D render. Just a mind-bogglingly beautiful photogenic tornado, and actually rated EF2. So a very strong anticyclonic tornado, very exceptionally rare. But going back to this, what do we see here? Like we can draw our fronts, right? We see a little bit of cyclonic curvature down here, so we'll put just a little bit of a low pressure center here. We can see that we have a dry line. We'll put this in this color. Kind of somewhere generally out here. You've got some 50 dew points, but it tanks off quickly as you go this way, right? 20-degree dew points out over here. And if we put up a cold front here, there seems to be a little bit of a cold front draped roughly somewhere in here, because we can see temperatures here in the 70s and low 80s, but then temperatures and dew points kind of rise and dew points drop off dramatically south of that point. So we get some type of boundary location more or less like this, and our warm front obviously is going to be draped somewhere out here as we have temperatures racing into the 90s, but then 80s and 70s on the north side. So that kind of gives you a synoptic idea of kind of what's going on here. And we get this like a little bit of like a surface boundary here. We get this upslope regime, so it flows this moisture northward into Colorado, and we get this secondary boundary that kind of develops in here. And the storm basically blows up on it or just north of it, hooks onto it, and this is your bread and butter for a storm chaser. If you're on a supercell that is in dew points, in moisture, along a boundary, you are ready to hit gold. And this storm ends up producing just an absolute beautiful set of tornadoes here. If I kind of click through these, you can see all just different views that other people had. There's this supercell, just this beautiful bell-shaped updraft, completely free, zero rain around the updraft itself, so you can see everything very beautifully. And the reason for that is going here to this reanalysis sounding, we can see that there's a little bit of dry air here at the surface. There's moisture there. There's plenty of deep moisture, but it's not saturated, right? That red and green lines aren't together, which would mean saturation. And we have lots of dry air here, but there's still plenty of precip being generated in this. But look how long this photograph is. Generally, all this precip is going to be advected way out over here, and your updraft is going to be marked out here, right, from our bunker's right motion. So this tells you that there's plenty of separation from your updraft, from your precipitation, so you're expecting photogenic storms. And this profile as well is just a classic high plains setup where you've got a little bit of sin in your lowest layer near the ground, but it's all basically just cape and dry, stretchable atmosphere with, a lot of elevated cape aloft. So this is like, if you want to just take a mental screenshot, everybody, if you're out chasing and you see long curved photographs like this, very shallow, not strong, I've noticed in my tenure of chasing storms that there is a too much to upslope when things get very wet, and it's very easy to do if your moisture is too much and your photographs get way too curved, then you actually overdo it in a sense. But if you don't have enough curvature, you really have to rely on splitting storms and favorable storm mergers to get that type of interaction to generate tornadoes. So it's a very fine line you have to work with Colorado. If any of you had chased back in 2021 in eastern Colorado, there were a lot of amazing upslope setups that year, but all of them were garbage, 60 mile an hour moving rain slop messes with tornadoes, and they weren't the most photogenic storms, and that's just because there was just so much moisture and a way too much low-level curvature in your photographs that you generated high precipitation supercells rather than these more LP type supercells. So upslopes are very temperamental, which is why most people stick to their dry lines out over the plains, because they're easier, they're a lot more predictable, and there's a lot less issues. But these can produce just absolutely beautiful types of setups. And one thing I do want to mention, because I realize I failed to talk about this, we talked about how dew points are, like, as they get funneled upslope, they become more efficient when they get up here, meaning you need less moisture overall. You've probably heard that, but it's hard to explain, like, what does that mean? You know, how does less moisture work better? Because it feels like a little backwards, right? And it's because we're at higher elevation. So funny things happen in the atmosphere when you raise your moisture in elevation in the atmosphere. Now, we're not necessarily generating different atmosphere. We're just higher up, so there's less air pressure. So things behave differently up here than it is, say, in Oklahoma and Kansas, Iowa, etc. And the reason for that is how skew-Ts work. For those that are familiar, you understand that a skew-T means that it is tilted at a 45-degree angle. So it's not perfectly upright. It is skewed to the left at 45 degrees. So we get these nice plots that are easily able to discern lots of changes in these, in the sounding itself, So with moisture, a general rule of thumb in Colorado is if dew points get into the 50s, it is just as good as dew points in the 60s in the plains. And why is that? And it's because how skew-Ts work. If we take a dew point at a certain point on the skew-T at the surface in, say, eastern Colorado near Denver, where we're almost a mile high, versus a dew point in Oklahoma. Obviously, we have a lot of air that doesn't exist in Denver that does exist in Oklahoma. How thermodynamics work is as you drop as you lower a parcel of air, you can actually follow the mixing ratio. I'm trying to think words here. Again, flying at the seat of my pants. You can follow the mixing ratio down, and I think this actually is going to be a bad sounding to use, so I'm going to get me an example sounding here. So just 1 second.
And I see Storm Chaser Jack Kelly, one of our moderators. He said the May 18th had tornadoes in Colorado with dews in the high 40s, which is just absolutely nuts. If you're anywhere else in the United States, you would tell somebody that they were full of crap if they told you that, but that can get the job done.
I don't want to talk about that because I I live up here and I drove to Kansas, and on my route eastward, I drove underneath that storm as it developed over Franktown, Colorado, which is well south of Bennett, Colorado, where it ended up producing multiple photogenic storms, photogenic tornadoes, more land spouty type of tornadoes, but still really phenomenal tornadoes nonetheless. But yeah, I drove underneath that updraft and was going east, saw it, and had a thought of like, and I checked my surface map, and I'm like, 75 over 42. Don't do it. Don't do it. As I kept driving east. And then an hour later, I get reports of the tornado ongoing, and I had a sad mental moment. sometimes
But I mean,
Mother Nature
I
does
mean,
funny things.
I was going to say a 30-degree TD spread. I mean, you can't really be faulted for not going after that. That's craziness.
Yeah, and that just gets into how boundaries work with tornadoes. That tornado and that supercell produced its tornadoes simply because of just such an intense boundary that was sitting right underneath it. If you watched radar on that day, you would see that there was a very exceptional, almost dry line-esque curved arc boundary, very tightly curved boundary, which was just a perfect stretch zone. And when that updraft rolled right across it, it already had all of the vertical motion that it needed. So it was very easy able to produce tornadoes. Because again, remember, just because the low levels suck doesn't mean a supercell can't exist because it exists above that point. But the moment that a supercell goes in an environment that it says, oh, hey, I can tornado, it's probably going to put down one very, very fast because it's already done the legwork to rotate in the initial. Now it's got the low levels to say, I agree, and boom, instant tornadoes. But they're very hard to forecast, very tough. So don't fault yourself if you missed that one. It kind of was yay for the locals that were there. Not me, because I'm not that cool, but unfortunate. And actually, this is actually going to work out as a really good example sounding. So let's pull this over. So we're going to pull this over here, and this will be a really great example of a sounding with the mixing ratios that I was talking about. Basically, the idea is that if your parcel of air in Denver is somewhere up here, and you're able to descend this as it goes down in elevation, you actually end up in a lower elevation with a higher moisture level. Generally, a good rule of thumb, and I did this calculation once upon a time, and so did a few others, so forgive me, I'm kind of quoting off of this. But generally, a 58 degree dew point in Denver, which is really good, would equate to more of like a mid 60 dew point in Oklahoma, like Oklahoma City. So if you can think, hey, let's just like, oh, there's no 60 dews in Colorado, it's not going to produce, suddenly there's tornadoes, and you're like, what happened? It's because there is the same content of moisture in the air, even though it's a lower dew point, right? It's just a measure of how much water is in the air. Dew point is just what temperature does the air suddenly condense at, right? And at higher elevations, it's going to be cooler. At lower elevations, it can get warmer. So good rule of thumb is generally is if dew points in the Denver area reach about 50 or higher, it could be a really good day. And that's like the calling card for big upslope regimes in the high plains. I don't know if there were any questions here. There's another example that I want to try to pull up. So
Yeah. Well, you're getting that one pulled up. We do have a couple of questions that I'll throw your way. So we have Jen Kushner, and she asked, does the moisture do the weird stuff at the higher elevations? Is it just due to the sea level, or do the mountains actually contribute as well? So is there an element of orographic lift that's also aiding things?
absolutely. The fact that we get ground to cause lift is such a fascinating thing in meteorology. And it's been a thing that has really baffled scientists until more recent years to understand how mountains upslope plays a role in not just severe weather and tornadoes, but also the basic meteorology of your day-to-day lives. Upslope is a fascinating thing. So a little bit of meteorology here. A concept that we all are familiar with, whether you realize it or not, is that we all agree that air cannot penetrate a solid object. Obviously, it's moving fast enough, sure. But if air flows into a solid object, something has to move, right? Well, considering the rock is much heavier and denser than the air will go around it. This causes a diversion of air in all directions. If air is forced to go up, it is called orographic lift. And if air is forced down, it is just called air or orographic sink. It's, the same type of thing, just reversed. So mountains can generate really fascinating weather because air can't go through it. It has to go over. And a little nugget for those that are paying attention to the weather, the next several days in the United States are going to be very windy if you live, on the northern half of the US. And this is because of this similar type of thing. This is more relevant again for the high plains because as air runs into a mountain, it has to rise. And on the west side of the mountains, it's actually very stable. There's not a lot of instability. It doesn't want to rise, it wants to sink. But if it can't go through, it's forced to rise. And if that air is, goes up and is stable, it'll induce negative buoyancy, so like negative cape, and will want to accelerate downward. So the moment the ground opens up, that air descends, slams into the ground, and you get these big wind events. And if you have a very strong synoptic system, it'll carry that energy all across the United States, which is what's actually going to happen here over the next few days across the US, which is what's kept me busy at work. Love that. I don't. It's awful. But in storm chasing, the same exact thing happens. A upslope wind is a warming and moistening wind, and a downsloping wind is a drying and generally a cooling experience overall. So, or excuse me, I flip those. I sometimes get those a little mixed up. Upslope is a cooling and moistening, and downsloping is a warming and drying. There we go. Got my meteorology correct. So, good question. Very good question. What else we got?
And then Kazaki coming in with another great question. Wants to know which models tend to handle upslope regimes the best in your experience?
This is a great question because it's not going to be as traditional as you think. I will always say the Euro is going to be the number one model generally for most forecasting. But if you're within that day range, I would arguably say the HER struggles a lot with low-level moisture because it's a model that really wants to generate boundary layer conditions that are favorable for generating thunderstorms. So it tends to overmix. So oftentimes, the HER will actually severely underdo moisture. A model that is generally considered bad but has a couple good uses is actually going to be the 3KM NAM. The 3KM NAM is a really good model for understanding how moisture flows. It might slightly overdo the moisture, so that's something to pay attention to. It tends to have a very cool and saturated bias. So sometimes you'll see areas, especially in the spring, early spring, winter, fall, where the NAM just has like 10 to 15 degree too cool of temperatures, but much higher moisture. And it's just because it doesn't allow the sun to heat as efficiently. But in these June, July days where there's no way to generate heavy cloud cover, but yet it can handle that really fine scale detail of where that moisture goes. And if it's able to hold on, that's usually a really good model to pay attention to. So I would say add that to your repertoire of models to play around with. It's a model, so it's not always going to be perfect. But if I had $1 for every single time that I saw the HER overmix low-level moisture, especially in upslope regimes, I'd be a millionaire. Like it's kind of a broken model. It's really funny. Has its good uses, but don't be surprised if you're looking at the model and you do like a model trend that you see moisture slowly increase with each run as you get closer to an event. And that's just because the model has its biases and it really struggles. So turn towards the 3KM NAM in that case, the NAM, the Euro in those cases, then that might be a little bit more accurate and getting a hold of what moisture is looking like. But aside from that, just use all of them. Look at all of them. Take a blend of all models, no matter what they are, just play them side by side. Pivotal has an easy function where you can see as many models as possible that have that available hour and just see, which ones are closest to reality and go from there. Good question. Really great question.
I am absolutely shook that you gave the endorsement to the 3K NAM after all of the slander that I've heard about it since I started Storm Chaser coaching with Trey back earlier this year. So I listen, I'm trying to orient myself right now in a world where the 3K NAM isn't complete garbage, but I think that just goes to show that once you understand how all of the models are wrong, like Coach Kyle Gillette says all the time, then you can figure out exactly when you can take that specific tool out and if there is a very specific circumstance where that actually might be helpful. So I think it's really cool that you mentioned that because it does show that in meteorology, nothing is a blanket one size fits all perfect tool for analysis. You really always have to be in the habit of blending and asking yourself, just like Kazaki did, what is the best or the best set of tools for this particular job?
Exactly. No, I think every model has a use. Just understand where it has a shortcoming. That model is generally a really bad model overall, but it has its uses, and those uses can save your life. Figuratively and maybe literally, but you know what I mean. So yeah, so here is actually that example I was talking about. This is another extremely famous, more recent case than Simla. This is the Akron 2023 Tornado Fest that Tony Laubach here shot on YouTube. You can see two twin tornadoes here. This is actually a giant revolving mesocyclone that produced over 30 tornadoes within a span of a couple of hours, and the supercell hardly even moved. And just an absolute phenomenal example of just incredible meteorology generating this. And the biggest thing here to point out is like we had exceptional moisture, and actually, for those that are familiar with the day, a lot of storm chasers actually went up to Wyoming to go chase a potentially more conditionally favorable event, but they missed out on a due easterly weather ob in northeast Colorado that had a 70 dew point. I'm going to tell you this right now. If you see a 70 dew point in Colorado, please go chase it, because I want to know what happens, because it does not happen. You do not see that level of moisture at this elevation almost ever. And this morning,
God, I've heard God
exceptional.
himself descends down from the cloud deck and
Yeah.
spins up the atmosphere with his finger when you get a 70 dew point in Colorado.
Yeah, this level, and you can actually see, this is a beautiful example of upslope. You can see as I kind of pace back and forth here, you can see that moisture and that low level convective cloud cover really push up the slope here. And I mean, look at this. We're talking dew points in the low 70s. Of course, this is in the precip, but out here over far eastern Colorado, dew points in the 70s, upper 60s. Like, this is just exceptional moisture here to just pay attention to on a chase day. And like here, yeah, like right here in the morning, 81 over 70, or this is early afternoon, excuse me. This is, I believe, 1:45 p.m. At the time. And yeah, this is a ridiculous ob. I don't know why anyone would go up here in the stratiform cloud cover out over here and no roads that is partly southeast Wyoming and go after this. But yet you had this golden atmosphere chilling out here with dew easterlies at 15, even 20 knots. Like, people, I want you to realize, I want you to see, if this happens, please go there and then prove everyone wrong. And if nothing happens, oh well, you rolled the dice, right? If no one rolled the dice, then no one would have saw the EF5 in North Dakota. So roll the dice, have some fun. Upslope is a really fun regime to play around with. And it's like, looking at the synoptics, like this wasn't anything special aloft. You just had some broad flow at 500 millibars, so it was actually fairly displaced. You had light 20 knots of flow across the region, nothing too exceptional. Here at 300 millibars, where you look for a lift, you're almost entirely displaced from the right entrance. You're just a little bit in it. It's more kind of out over here. So like, this wasn't a synoptically amazing day, but yet someone was able to walk home with 30 plus tornadoes in a 2-hour period. Like, just meteorology is cool, folks. Like, and upslope regimes are just a really cool example of cool, fun things happening. What other questions we got?
Yeah, next up, we have Jen coming in with good back-to-back questions. I'll start off with her first one here. She asks, what is the HRRR good for if it sucks at moisture and it sucks at convecting? And I'll say, I think that you were couching that specifically in terms of the upslope regimes, but I'll let you go ahead and further explain if there's more context that's required there.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great follow-up point. Not just for upslope, but in general. Yeah, the HRRR has its issues, but it is, gosh dang, the best model we got. At the end of the day, it is the best model, because if you simply say, oh, that's too dry, let me add 5 to 10 degree dew points, what happens? Probably reality in most cases. The dew point, or excuse me, the HRRR model, the best thing it does at is generating convection where you're able to mix the atmosphere, where you're able to really heat the ground, turn over that low level atmosphere right above the ground, and generate thunderstorms. It's the best model we have. It's one of the most finely tuned models that we have that's really focused purely on generating convection. So it is the number one model to go to when you're forecasting for severe weather. But again, like any model, it has its flaws. And the Hern model gets a lot of bad rap because we use it so much. So it sees the most time used by an individual. And the more you use something, and if it's flawed, the more you see the flaws, right? If you started using other models like the DAM, if you started using other models like the WRF WRF models, you would find those difficulties, right? Those biases that the model may have. And again, it's just a tool, but it is just a commonly used tool, and it's one of the best tools we have. So, good question.
The second question was, I don't use any models yet, but which model is the best to start with for beginners? This is a great question because I feel like a lot of people have asked this, or even if they haven't asked it, they may be in a very similar spot. So what advice would you give, Hunter, if somebody is, looking at some of the training material here at Storm Chaser Coaching, they're participating in these discussions, and they want to start dipping their toes into using models, but obviously they're not going to be able to compare 5 different types of models across multiple runs per day. They just want to learn one model first. Where would you send them if that was the case?
Yeah, and that is a phenomenal question. There's a lot of places you can go, and especially in now day and age, right? We have almost free access is Pivotal. You've got other sites like Weather Bell, Tropical Tidbits, name any other site. Like, we have so much availability to receive data.
College of DuPage.
College of DuPage, exactly. There's just so much that you can get your hands on, and it can feel overwhelming. If you're focusing on strictly chasing supercells in the short range, like 1 to 2 days, the Her model is going to be the best. And I will always push everyone towards that model because it is easy to say, I'm going to add 5-degree dew point to a model than say, why can't I figure out where this boundary is going to be? Because the model has no idea to begin with. But there are flaws, there are issues. Understanding those issues come with time, as well as using some of the resources here we have at Storm Chaser Coaching, as well as just personal experience working with others, getting your hands dirty and using it yourself. That comes with time. And unfortunately, I wish I could impart that, but I can't. But I wish I could, because it would make everyone's lives easier. And Stefan here posted a really funny thing here in the chat where someone had a tweet, this person, Weather Track US, put out using the what's it called, Helicity Swaths. For all those listening, please never look at Helicity Swath and treat it as gospel. You are dumb if you do that. Don't do it. You're not dumb. You're smart. Don't be dumb.
No. We've already established that on a podcast with Coach Kyle Gillette earlier this year. So you are completely in the clear. You can call people as dumb as you'd like, because we already warned them, and we done told them all, don't use updraft Helicity Swaths. So.
Yeah, please no. But that being said, going back to the question, the Her model is generally the best. It's going to be the most accurate, and I say most, not the most accurate, not the most accurate thing, but it will be really good at giving you an idea of where to go, what to look for. It does a really great job with boundary locations. It does a really good job with generating thunderstorms. And when it struggles, you probably can derive the issue back to a lack of moisture. And all you have to do is pull up a surface map and say, hey, does that dew point match this dew point? Yes, no. If not, let's just add some dew point. And realistically, does a storm form there? It might. And you go from there. And the nice thing with the Her is we get runs every single hour. And every 6 hours, they go out to 48-hour periods rather than the 18-hour period that it's usually held to. So it is the best model to get into, get your hands dirty. And in the future, when we actually get back into storm season, right now we're obviously in winter, so it's a little less relevant now. Feel free to tag me or other coaches when you want to ask questions again about using the model and talking over any of the biases and whatnot. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of forecast threads here in the future when we get back into storm season here in Storm Chaser Coaching here on Discord that I know probably me and a few other coaches will be probably involved in as well. So feel free to obviously ask future questions as we get actual cases to play with, rather than just sitting here in winter and freezing and hoping for tornadoes again.
Steven says we need a module on how to chase storms via analyzing UH tracks and following reed timber. So that's the 1-2. That's the actual cheat code. It's not surface vorticity and 3-kilometer cape. It's UH tracks and following reed timber.
Well, see, to be fair, all you have to do is turn on his live stream if you want to follow him. So that's pretty easy to do. So, I feel like you guys got this. I don't think you need me for this. You can handle this on your own.
Absolutely. Now, we don't have any more questions in the queue, but I actually have a couple that I've been holding off on asking. So I'll go ahead and throw one of them out there right now, Hunter. Let's say that I am chasing an upslope regime. How would I want to position myself relative to the developing storms that might be different from how I would want to chase in, say, the Midwest or the Plains or Dixie Alley? I know it has its own personality, and the road networks in Colorado and eastern New Mexico and Wyoming may be a little bit different than other places in the country. So what are some common pitfalls or tricks of the trade that we would want to use when we're out there actually physically chasing?
Absolutely. This is a really great question. There are two things you'll need to pay attention to. And the first one is more basic because this applies to just generally everything in storm chasing is you need to pay attention to your atmospheric storm speeds by themselves. You can do this very easily on model soundings, see how fast a storm is moving, and understand hey, if my storms are only moving at 20 miles an hour, the same rules apply that I can travel slowly, I can take my time, I can sit outside longer. That's a pretty basic thing. Not necessarily unique to Upslope, but the one that really, I think, plays a role is boundaries are so important. There are oftentimes upslope regimes that have boundaries. Where those exist are going to be where you can have converging winds. The cool thing with especially Colorado is you have ridges. So if you take we'll say a horizontal slice through Denver along I-25 north to south, and you're looking back west, you would see 3 different ridges across the state. And the North Ridge is going to be the Cheyenne Ridge that downslopes into the Denver area. You go back up the Palmer Divide and then back down into the Raton Mesa, which goes back up into New Mexico. When you have air or you have land that naturally rises and falls, you will have deflections of the low-level wind field due to pressure differences in that area. What does that mean? That means there's higher pressure in one area locally and lower pressure in an area locally. That causes air to move, and you can have slight adjustments to the surface wind. This is really common in areas that have really deep river valley channels or large valleys, things like that, where air is forced to go one way. No matter what the synoptic air above it says, the air has to generally flow one way or another. Because that's just where the land allows, right? We talked about that air doesn't go through the ground, so it has to go around. So it follows where it can. And in Colorado, that is extremely relevant because on one side, you could have we'll take the Palmer Ridge in central Colorado. Sometimes you'll have a northeasterly wind on the north side. And as you get closer to Colorado Springs, it'll be almost a east-southeasterly wind. That is just a gentlest little bit zone of convergence right along that ridge. And as a storm chaser, if you're chasing in the late summer, you'll want to generally be right along that boundary. You want to sit, you want to see lots of sunshine, you want to watch your boundary bake. If you like to make bread, then you like to sit there and watch it bake until a storm comes to you, because that's just where pressure falls are going to be. That is where the supercell wants to go. There is shear there. There is instability right on that boundary. And those are very common in the Texas Panhandle, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, and into Montana. Some parts of the Eastern Plains as well, where you get a little bit more dry line interactions. But if you're ever out chasing and an upslope regime, look for boundaries, because otherwise everything's probably going to be very sloppy. And I don't know about you, but I didn't come out to chase slop. Neither did you. So let's go have some fun. So look for boundaries, look for areas of convergence of things like that. And in the summertime, be ready for your storms to not move the direction the atmosphere says they should, because they will follow the tongue of instability wherever it is. And oftentimes you will have supercells bombing due south, even though everything else is moving east-northeast. So pay attention to that. Always be on the south side of storms on the upslope. And look for boundaries.
I'm not sure if you saw yet on social media, but Merriam-Webster released the new word for 2025 that they're adding to the dictionary.
Uh-oh. What is it?
Slop. Slop was their word of the year. I don't know if it was the word they're adding to the dictionary. Clearly, that was already a word, but like they like highlighted it being like their word of the year or something like that. But it just made me think of when people are tweeting out about how WX Twitter has broken containment. Like
Oh no.
we've officially launched an all-out assault on the lexicon, and everybody is using slop now in their day-to-day lives.
My
Which we
favorite
were
is
the originals.
yeah, I call things slop, but my favorite thing is to call things soup. If your storm and environment turns to soup, you know, you've all seen soup and it's garbage.
Mhm. I always call it an MC mess.
Ugh, it's all
So
gross. All
yeah,
gross. Give me the
gross
dry
all the way
air.
around. Dixie slop soup sandwich.
Yep.
Yep.
Gross.
Tyler P says, "Love the Palmer Divide's effect on weather. Hate chasing the area. It's the freaking Bermuda Triangle."
I love the Palmer Ridge, but that's because I saw Simla and I will forever be biased. But um, it's just another piece of land that goes up. It's nothing too specific, you know. Hey, at least there's phone service, okay? You know, you can't say the same thing about the Texas Panhandle all the time. So, hey, take what you can get.
I do remember the one time that I was chasing in Colorado. We cut south from the northeast portion of the state to basically go down and then catch 70 in right when it was by Kansas border. And I think we went 2 hours with no cell phone service. I don't know if that's typically what you can expect when you're chasing in far eastern Colorado, but it was the first time I'd ever gone that long with no cell phone service. It was kind of crazy. And I like there was nothing. The highway that we were on, there were no houses, there were no
Yep.
gas stations, there was absolutely nothing but rolling hills.
Yeah, when you get over, there's a joke that Last Chance Colorado is a really funny location for multiple reasons, but I also like to say it's your last chance at phone service and civilization. You know, when you pass that point, that small town in northeast Colorado, it really does turn into the boondocks. There is nothing out there. Um, so yeah, sometimes you lose service in eastern Colorado. And to be fair, also another tip: if you're ever chasing Colorado, bring a gas can, like a spare 5 gallon gas can in your car, because um, northern New Mexico and eastern Colorado is probably one of the only places I've ever been in the world where I'm like, man, I might run out of gas. I got a full tank. I just filled up, and I'm kind of afraid of running out of gas. This kind of sucks. So another fun tip: bring a gas can. It'll save your life, whether yours or somebody else's.
I think it was 385 by the way. Does that ring a bell?
385. I feel like I know where that is. I feel like that's out
So,
by Ray.
yeah, I believe we were coming back from Akron. So we were on I'm looking at it right here. We were on Route 34 traveling east,
Yep.
and then we picked up 385 south at Ray, and then that was when we basically just drove without seeing anything for hours. So
Yep. There it is. Yep, between Idalia and Rare. Yeah, there's nothing out there.
yep, absolutely nothing. So in case anybody ever finds themselves out that way, just know that like Hunter said, you better have a gas can with you because there's a decent chance if you need fuel, it's going to be a couple of hours.
Yep, absolutely. Completely agree. Any
All
other questions?
right. Tyler P said, I'm talking Black Forest specifically. Where's the Black Forest at?
Oh, the Black Forest area is just north of Colorado Springs. It's like if the Palmetto Ridge sits like this, the Black Forest is over here with Colorado Springs on the south side. It kind of tails off towards Lyman, but doesn't quite get there. Yeah, there's some forest there, but you get scenery. You get trees for the first time in Colorado when you're out on the plains. Like, that's pretty good. Now if you get a tornado there, it has something to throw, you know. Hey, what's wrong with that? There's nothing, you know, get something to look at.
Now, What about specifically the other terrain features? I know we've talked a little bit about Palmer, but what are
Mhm.
the other ones, and how do they work for specifically affecting potential for tornadoes, supercells, that sort of thing?
Yeah, no, this is one of the reasons why Denver actually turns into something really cool. Is you've probably heard of the Denver Convergence Vorticity Zone, and it is a natural area of spin that sits over the Denver area because of two factors. One, you have the Palmer Ridge on the south side of Denver, but then well to the north you have the Cheyenne Ridge. When air goes over that, generally, depending on the direction, right? If it comes from the east, it's just pure upslope. But if you get that more northeasterly wind, you will actually see downsloping wind from the Cheyenne Ridge on the north side. That can lower your dew points, kind of evaporate that moisture a little bit more. Then you get back over the Denver area, go back upslope, and so it can moisten again. You drop back down by Colorado Springs into Pueblo. It really drops down in elevation comparatively. You go from, Cheyenne being at about 5,200 feet, maybe a little higher than that. You drop down to about 5,000 feet near Loveland. You go back up to Denver to almost a mile high, which is 5,280 feet. You get up to the top of the Palmer at almost 7,000 feet. I think it's a little over that. You drop back down to Colorado Springs and Pueblo, which Pueblo drops below 5,000 feet elevation. I think it's like 4,006, but don't quote me. And then back up towards Trinidad and the Raton Mesa, again, back to that 6, 7,000, 8,000 feet, depending on the mountains there. And so you get these really unique zones where you can funnel moisture on one side, but then it's super dry on another. So it creates these, like, essentially like weak dry lines, essentially, like, more mountainous, more terrain driven dry lines. So something to pay attention to when you play out in, especially like the Trinidad area. Sometimes you can really get some good moisture pooling on either side of that escarpment, as well as the Cheyenne Ridge. You get on that north side near Pine Bluffs, Kimball. You can get some really good moisture on that north side that funnels in up the river valley that way as well. So, yeah.
By the way, I don't know if you saw, but you blew up the chat.
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't stoop to such low garbage.
I don't know if I had shared this with you or not previously, but I got Trey with that the last time we were on a stream together.
Oh boy.
I asked him about different dew points, and I was like, do you think a 6-7 degree dew point, would that be enough to get the job done if that was in place? And he didn't. Obviously, he has no idea about 6-7, so he like launched into this whole thing about 67-degree dew point. That'll actually. And meanwhile, the whole chat is losing their mind.
I just want to say one thing. I'm old, but not that old, and I think the 6-7 meme thing is dumb. But I also reminded myself that we all thought it was funny when Markiplier did the E meme, and then I realized, maybe we're all okay.
Yeah, the kids are all right. The kids are definitely all right.
They'll be okay.
Speaking of Markiplier, I got to give a shout out to, I think, pound for pound, one of the best videos on YouTube of all time, which was him going through like all 300 and some Pokemon at the time and doing Smash or Pass
My.
with every Pokemon.
And then
Do
Matt Pat doing a
not.
whole video
Do
trying to figure
not.
out what Markiplier's type is twice.
Right? Just
Twice.
Come on, Anna. You know you've seen that video before.
Stupid.
Oh, I've seen it.
It's
And your
one of
Vaporeon
the
references in the group chat.
yeah, there's like a running in the work chat. There is a running Vaporeon reference that's constantly coming up over and over again. Those who know. Those who don't know, I'm not going to explain it. So I'll leave it at that.
True.
All right. So no questions. Apparently, everybody here is already an upslope master. So there's nothing left that they need to know. If you guys have any questions that are not specifically about upslope regimes, Hunter's here for another 15, 20 minutes or so. He'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. I guess I'll start with when will the tornado hit my house? If you could just let me know.
I'm going to say, we'll say April 16th, 2027.
All right, it's on my
I have
calendar.
a question.
Yeah, go for it,
in
Anna.
Clarksville?
Which Clarksville?
Say that again.
What is the weather like in Clarksville, Tennessee right now?
Well, according to my Google, you are 41 degrees Fahrenheit. You're welcome.
Anna, is that where you're located at right now?
No, it's a Ryan Hall meme.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Interesting.
not a.
Clarksville
I'm not an.
check-in.
Yeah, I'm not a. I'm not an AI bot. He's better than me. It. I feel like it's it. I can't remember if y'all bot has a gender, but anyways.
Markiplier also, I believe, just released a movie, like an actual
Yeah,
Hollywood
Iron
production
Lung.
movie. Yeah, I thought
Iron
that looked pretty
Lung.
cool.
Yeah, we'll see if I end up going to see it. Horror movies are not my forte. I've got enough scary things in life to deal with than sit down and freak myself out in a movie. But I might go watch it. I know there's a couple theaters here in Denver that are going to show it, so I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'll give some ridiculously embarrassing lore since we're on the topic of horror movies. I
Ooh,
saw the movie Signs when I was in high school. It freaked me out
yeah,
beyond belief,
yeah.
and ever since then, I have always slept with a light on.
Uh-huh. There are two movies that have traumatized me as a child. Well, maybe three. There was The Ring, the original, because I saw it when I think I was like 10 years old, so it traumatized me. I saw Signs also when I think I was 10 years old. There's a
Yep.
pattern. And then there's another movie, I can't remember what it was called, but it was about a tooth fairy, but it's a demon that basically if you see the tooth fairy, she kills you, but she's there to take your teeth like a normal tooth fairy, but if you see her, she hunts you in the shadows. It's a terrifying movie, really good. So those three
Yeah.
movies like have ruined my life. So I'd rather just be stuck on a dirt road in the mud with an EF5 bearing down on me than watch those movies again, to be honest.
Yes, absolutely. So it's good to know that there's another anti-horror aficionado here with me because I can't stand horror movies. My daughter loves them, my girlfriend loves them, they watch them together. My brother loves them. Everybody, it seems like everybody I know personally loves horror movies. I can't watch them. I just can't do it.
I'm such a baby. I can't do it.
Yep.
I have never gone out of my way to watch a horror movie.
Yep.
Good. Keep it up. Stay strong.
And we have lots of people in chat dropping The Ring was nightmare fuel, says Jen. She doesn't like horror movies either. Tyler P says the first movie to traumatize him was Twister. He couldn't finish the F3 scene.
Oh
Wow.
no. It's like the
Which one
best
was the
one.
F3? Which one was the
Isn't
F3?
isn't it the one where the boat flies down the road and it's the jumping one in the cone of silence?
Okay, yep, that makes sense. That makes
I think it's
sense.
that one. Oh, story time. Little tangent because I've got a squirrel brain. That movie scene was actually filmed in near Boone, Iowa, and that was right near where I lived. And about one day ago, 4 years ago, there was a really big derecho that happened. And that derecho produced hundreds of tornadoes across the Midwest. And one of those tornadoes I saw, and it ran over the movie location called Twister Hill in Boone, Iowa. So I have peaked in life, and it is not getting any better. Like I have gotten married. I've had a kid now. It is like it's over. I've peaked in life. There's nothing better than this. I saw a
I, lo-
tornado at a movie site. This is great.
I feel like one of those sports teams that trades for and then signs a player who's over the hill to a massive contract. Like we get you here at Storm Chaser coaching after you're already on the decline. So now
Oh
we,
yeah.
we can expect decreased production for the rest of your contract.
Hate to tell you this, guys, but I have a kid now, so you'll see me when you see me. Sorry.
Yep, you'll see me. That's cool.
Until I
Cool.
teach him to
Cool.
chase, then it's over for all of you. Then now I've got someone to navigate for me, and I'll always be out. So work in progress.
It is going to be fun to see because I feel like the proliferation of storm chasing that's happened in the last 10 to 20 years, we haven't quite gotten to the point yet where all of the youngsters who are the children of the people who chase storms are quite old enough to drive or at least trustworthy enough to take out storm chasing. So I think
Hmm.
that you will see in the next 10 to 15 years a lot more people out there chasing with their kids who just grew up with mom and dad like Hunter who were out there storm chasing all the time and they got interested and they got into it and now they're following in the footsteps. I think that'll be a really cool development.
Yeah, I'm also just waiting for another. Oh, I don't know. 2012 to like 2015 period where the years suck at storm chasing and everyone stops chasing. So now the roads get uncongested.
Just like the natural filter that resets the whole storm chasing game.
Yeah. Basically, brings it back to the real ones that really want to be out there because we're willing to go bust for nothing. So
Kazaki coming in with a great question. With upslope environments having cooler temperatures, how do you assess whether instability is still sufficient enough?
that is a great question, and glad we're back on topic. Uh, um, no, this is a great one because oftentimes your surface is going to be very cool. Like in some of the cases we looked at, right? The June 21st, 2023, cyclic supercell that produced 30 tornadoes in Colorado. The temperatures thankfully got up into the upper 70s and even the low 80s, which obviously everyone would be like, yeah, that's great. Everything's wonderful. But what if I told you earlier this year I chased an upslope regime in April and it was in the low 50s with dew points in the 40s, right? But yet I still saw a supercell and it almost tried to produce a tornado and I would have been right on it, but unfortunately it said no, and then I'm just like, oh, okay, cool. But the idea is simply just you need those mid-level lapse rates to be very steep, that 9 degrees Celsius, 8 degrees Celsius, even 10 degrees Celsius cool temperatures as they cool as you go up, because that generates the instability aloft. A misconception in storm chasing, especially for those that don't come from a meteorology background, the understanding of how CAPE works and how instability works in general is not just, oh, I have to reach a certain temperature dew point threshold to be good enough. It's, am I unstable? How does that happen? Are we able to occur and be unstable correctly? You can generate that in the 50s. You can generate that in the 60s, 70s, and 80s temperature. It all just depends on the absolute makeup of the vertical profile of the atmosphere. You want lots of dry air aloft. You want moisture near the ground, and you want a bit of an inversion to kind of hold off to build instability because you want your ground to warm up as much as possible. So it's very easy for your upslope regimes to be too cloudy and not get that direct sunlight that heats the ground, which will then induce the air to warm. So the biggest thing to look for if you're out chasing, let's say you're out on a random day in May and we have a cold front that sweeps through and you get some 50 dew points to upslope here into Colorado. The biggest thing you're going to want to look for is what's the thickness of that cloud cover? Does it look very thick on satellite? If we get a sounding from somewhere, is it very thick or is it very thin? Are there already breaks in the clouds as well? And are the temperatures in the 40s? That's going to be really tough to work with. But if temperatures are already in the upper 50s, by let's say 7, 8 a.m., hey, there's maybe a chance that we actually burn off this cloud cover, remove it, by warming the ground and then separate that saturation. So you don't want your profile to be too saturated, having those green and red lines really close together. You want to see dry air aloft, see that really nice, dry, clean EML in the dew point line aloft with a little bit of sufficient moisture near the ground. That generates the best supercells. Now, of course, weather doesn't exactly fit in our boxes, so case by case, it may be different. But there are general good rules of thumb to follow. You just want to see sun break out by noon, temperatures warming at least into the 60s on a traditional storm chase day, preferably into the low 70s to really get you enough instability to get going. Steep lapse rates aloft, dry air aloft. That's kind of what you're looking for. Rather than so much like a specific number, but rather like what's the overall condition of that specific environment on a case by case basis.
Probably an obvious question, but since it hasn't been asked exactly, I'll go ahead and throw it out there. What is too far to the west for me to chase a supercell in an area where there's an upslope regime? Is there a tipping point where, where there's a whole like Gandalf, you shall not pass, don't go any further area?
I'm trying to think how I want to answer this. To make sure I understand your question correctly, you're just asking strictly what's the distance that you say is too far for you to go after an upslope?
Well, more like if, let's say, I wanted to chase an upslope regime, am I fine going to like the actual base of the Rocky Mountains and like nestling up against the Rockies? Or how far off of the area where things might form should I stay away if I'm staging and waiting to actually chase later in the day?
That is okay. Now I completely understand. Thank you for the clarification. That is a great question, and the funny thing is there's an easy answer, and it's simply be east of I-25. And it's not because of anything weather related. It's simply because people live here and you don't want to be in cities. And more times than not, out of all the times I've gone chasing here in Colorado, do you want to know how many times I've chased west of I-25? Maybe once or twice. Very rarely does my storm chase actually begin west of I-25 because storms blow up over the mountains, get over to the plains, and then develop as they go east. So generally I would say a good rule of thumb is if this looks like storms are going to develop right on the Rockies, you'll want to be about an hour east of them at most because you want to play them, give yourself time to make decisions, but also be close enough to attack it if something happens in that corridor. Like, for example, a couple of years ago, there was a big tornado in Highlands Ranch that a few people got to see, but that was one of the furthest west tornadoes in arguably modern history that has occurred, where there was a substantial supercell producing a tornado in Denver itself. But again, very rare. You'll want to stay a little bit further east, stay out of the metro area. If you're coming from the east to a Denver chase, Lyman is a really good place to set up. Fort Morgan is a great place to set up, kind of on that central and northern section. There isn't that great of a spot to kind of sit in south central Colorado. You could maybe do Kit Carson if you want. But it's a lot more barren, a lot less people out there, so there's not a lot of good staging areas. But if you're chasing something right off the Rockies, just hang a little bit east, about an hour. If it's going to look like you're going to have a bit of a dry line, have storm blow up a little bit further east on the plains, hang out just a little further east, give it about an hour distance, depending on the day. If it's slower, be closer. If it's further away, stay ahead, give yourself time to let storms develop, because that's a major falling point that a lot of storm chasers have, is they attack too early. When they see a supercell, even on a big day, and then they end up behind the tornado when it actually drops. And the biggest thing you can do is just give yourself some breathing room. I know we're all a bunch of ADHD spazzes that want to go sit underneath the clouds. I do too, but experience has taught me, like, hey, it's not going to produce a tornado immediately. And on the off chance it does, oh no, you rolled the dice bad. I'd rather just say my 1 in 100 chance got ruined, rather than I was behind the tornado and looking at it through RFD and could barely see it for 90% of my other chases. So sit out a little east, give yourself some time. Do not attack immediately. Give yourself some breathing room. Allow yourself time to make decisions based off of storm evolving, right? Because especially like my mentor, Cameron Nixon, has done a lot of research on storm interactions and nudgers, mergers, etc. And those play a role in how a supercell evolves. And if you're right on the storm as that's happening, you're either going to get smoked by a tornado that you'll never see coming, or you'll be behind it. So just give yourself some time, give yourself some breathing room off to the east, and let things work out for the first hour or two of storm chasing. Like even this year, an example being the EF5 that happened in North Dakota, those set of supercells. If you were chasing them immediately, they were hot garbage. They were super smooth, extremely full of sin, had no cape and the low levels. They were all very laminar, just bad storms to chase. They weren't that special. But then once you gave them a couple of hours, I think it was actually 45 minutes, then they started producing tornadoes. So just give them a little time, let them eat their food, get organized, give them a chance before you directly attack them. There's very little time that I've ever chased a storm where I've been like, I need to be on a storm immediately the moment it blows up, that it actually produces a tornado. It's almost never.
Yeah, that was the biggest unlock for me as a storm chaser, was not driving towards the storm once I saw it starting to develop, and just holding my ground, staying in the location and letting the storm come to me. Because I don't want to speak in absolutes, but it may be every single time I've ever drove towards a storm when I was in a perfect position to wait for it to come to me and intercept it, I have ended up missing out if there was a tornado that was produced, because it produced farther down the road. And since I was driving towards it, I was unable to catch back up to it after it passed me by.
Yep, it's just sometimes that happens, man. And actually, a funny example here, I'm gonna pull up here from my Twitter. If you guys follow me on Twitter, you probably saw me post this, just being kind of funny. I said send noodles, and it was this tornado picture. This was actually from a tornado on April 4th, 2023. And this is actually very relevant to this conversation, because this tornado happened from a storm that formed almost 100 miles away But once and all I did was sit where boundaries converged, and that storm ran right across it and produced the tornado immediately. And pulling up the chase archive, you guys can still see this, correct?
No, I think you might need to share it again.
Oh, I'm not sharing. LOL. Let me share my screen again. Sorry, everybody. I am bad. Okay. Where did you go? Oh, here you go. So, okay. You guys can see this guy?
Yeah.
So, this is the tornado by Pleasantville, Knoxville, Iowa on April 4th, 2023. And great tornado, really amazing, very strong. You don't get this type of funnel shape in a very dry environment without some pretty intense pressure falls and probably a strong tornado. So very, very beautiful photogenic tube there. And if you actually pay attention, the storm that actually formed the tornado right here, I believe was actually this guy, started north of Kansas City. So if you were sitting here on the Missouri border and attacked it immediately, you missed the tornado. Because look where this thing went. Look how far this guy traveled before it produced a tornado. So keep that in mind. Sometimes it really is just sit at a boundary and wait. Give your storm some breath, and especially if storms are moving really fast. This guy was moving at 60 miles an hour on this particular day. But you can see that it just absolutely rocketed to the northeast, traveling almost 100 miles before it actually produced one singular tornado. So, keep that in mind. Sometimes storms just, they need a little breathing room.
I think we all do from time to time. So
Yeah.
good advice, Hunter. I see Tyler P has jumped in with a comment. South Park gets tornadoes all the time. In parentheses, the geologic basin, not the TV show town.
Oh no. Oh no. They probably get more tornadoes than I do.
And Jack Kelly says, glad you didn't go for Lewistown because my God, it was a monster.
Actually, funny thing though, the Lewistown tornado actually kept me safer chasing the Carbon and Greenfield tornadoes, because the Carbon tornado, if for those who are familiar with it, maybe you aren't, but it actually began as a very large bowl with an extremely wide circulation here. My Lightroom is opening here. Excuse me. Let me move all this junk. Move this over here because I want to show you exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, began as a very large bowl. There was no defined singular center circulation. It was just kind of just hanging out there with this extremely wide debris cloud that made it very kind of nebulous, kind of hard to figure out where the exact interface of that tornado was. Which, for you chasing, that's very dangerous, because if I can't tell exactly where the tornado starts and ends, then I'm not going to be able to,
kind of an important thing to be able to identify when you're out storm chasing.
I know, it's just, and here's an example here. I got this finally opened. Share screen. Hopefully it's the right one. Yeah, that's the right one. So this is actually a picture of both Carbon here on the right, and this is the beginning of the Greenfield tornado over here, where a lot of chasers were about to get run over by it on the one road because no one saw this tornado coming. But that's a whole different story, and I'm sure you're all familiar with that guy. But the Carbon tornado was just this big, large bowl. And please tell me, for anyone here in the chat, please tell me where that tornado ends, because I can't tell you, and I was there. You can see the main debris cloud, but you can't tell if that debris cloud ends here or here. And I think the NWS quoted this as a 3/4 mile wide tornado, purely based off of wind damage. So this tornado was just exceptionally wide when it was coming towards me, and we had to run out of the way from this tornado, got out of its way, and it was just an absolute monster of a tornado as it ripped on by. And a hot take for all of you out there who like hot takes, I think Carbon was just as strong or similar strength, maybe a tad weaker than the Greenfield tornado. I firmly believe this tornado was a 4 or an EF5, because I've never seen this type of ripping motion at the ground in any tornado I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen multiple violent tornadoes. This was the most violent motion I've ever seen in my entire life. And I saw the Greenfield tornado, so that gives you a perspective. of this thing. This just an absolute gorgeous monster of a tornado that turned into just this absolute beautiful tube that I'm sure all of you have probably seen. So great tornado, good example. Louisville actually kept me safe, even though I didn't chase that tornado. This tornado behaved very similarly to that one, so I knew the smart thing to do is not actually chase the actual interface of the tornado, but look at the mesocyclone, stay outside of the RFD hook ahead of the mesocyclone. If this moves over you, the tornado will hit you. And we stayed on the left side, got out of its way, and stayed over here comparatively when this finally came overhead, and the tornado was able to safely pass behind us. But at the time, this was definitely coming right at me. So a little spooky, little spooky. Sometimes that happens in chasing. Make good decisions, take your escape routes.
It's probably a great opportunity to pitch the upcoming event with Trey. I believe that is Thursday, where we are going to be doing a storm identification discussion. It's something that a lot of people have been asking about, and I know Trey has a lot of different examples that he's going to screen share so he can point out the different features. So if you are one of the folks who have been looking forward to learning about storm feature identification, definitely make sure you join that event live if you can, but definitely check out the replay once that gets posted. Remember, in the channels list on the left-hand side, you'll see there is not only for the free office hours a replays channel, but there's also a group coaching replays channel, and we create time-stamped chapters for all of those, make them filled with keywords, so that way if you have anything in particular you're ever looking to learn about, you just click the magnifying glass at the top of the Discord channel, type in some terms, and it should pull up all the times that that specific term or terms was talked about on a group coaching session, and then you can go ahead and fly all through the timestamps and get all that information.
I highly recommend that. That sounds like a blast.
Yep, it's definitely going to be awesome. I think we have time maybe for one more question. So if anybody has anything on their mind that they have not dropped yet, I'll give you another, let's say, 2 minutes to throw something into chat, and we can have Hunter answer one more question. And if not, we will wrap things up here. So while I'm giving people that opportunity, Hunter, I'll shout out a few more comments. People are in agreement with you that the motion on that storm definitely warranted a potential EF4, EF5 consideration. And I guess I'll throw this your way. Do you think that with Enderlin being retroactively upgraded, we're going to start seeing a cascade of previous tornado ratings end up upgraded, and we'll have potentially more tornadoes like the Carbon Tornado in a higher classification?
That is a thing I so desperately hope for, because I think the biggest thing with the Fujita scale, why it was turned into the enhanced Fujita scale, is to obviously update with modernization and understanding of how physics work with building materials and how building materials last. But it also just makes the database consistent. And is a tornado weaker because it was rated an F5, or is it stronger because it was rated an EF5, or did this DI from 1997 say that, oh, it's only an EF3, but then we update it and we realize, oh, that's probably just noses it over to the 4. At the end of the day, does it really matter? Not really. But for the scientist part of me, I love things being classified as they truly should be. But the issue also is you can't classify things off vibes. As much as we'd like to as a society, we want to class things based on how we feel, what we felt, what we experienced. But that's not how science works. Science works with specific, hard, proven details, evidence. And the issue also is we just don't have enough stuff to run into, which is a good thing, because if we had more things to run into, more people would die. And I don't want that, and I hope you don't want that. But the also issue is, if you have a beautiful tornado roll across the eastern Colorado plains, it's probably going to get rated EF1. Because that's you can only move the dirt so much.
Okay, I have an idea.
That's it.
And it's definitely really dumb. But for all of you who have played Fortnite before, you know how you have some of those items where you can throw and like an entire building will pop up? What if, in order to get accurate ratings, we develop something like that when you're out chasing, you can just toss it out and deploy, and like have those things like the Dominator where the spikes go into the ground to hold it in place, and it's just like a little damage indicator grenade you can throw out there, and then we can accurately classify all these tornadoes because they actually hit something.
Unfortunately, and this is going to be a really bad joke, so everyone take this with a grain of salt. But unfortunately, the only deployable DIs that we have as storm chasers is our own vehicles. So don't do that. Don't do that.
You're telling me storm chaser coaching with an emphasis on safety should not be encouraging people to become the damage indicator they want to see in the world?
Please, gosh, no. Like, I love you. Don't do it. If someone loves you, if I don't, someone else does. Like, don't do it. Your car loves you. Don't do it.
We need that to be a shirt. Anna, I need that on a shirt. Become the damage indicator you want to see in the world.
Oh boy,
that is horrible advice. Do not
individuals out there that'll
no. I know this is
fit.
being recorded, so I know if this is taken out of context.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, no questions have come in. We appreciate everybody hanging out with us here tonight. Hunter, this was an excellent discussion. I know I learned a ton about upslope, forecasting, chasing, everything in between. And again, just a reminder to all of you folks, if you want to go back over anything that we talked about, specifically any part of the discussion, you don't want to watch the whole thing again, just wait 2 to 3 days. We'll have those links in the group coaching chat on the left-hand side. Timestamp chapters, you can search right through. And yep, that looks like it's about it. No questions coming in. So Hunter, thank you so much for joining us here tonight, man. I know you just got off of work, so you are the MVP, going straight from work right into this and dropping the knowledge on everybody.
Hey, I'm happy to be here. I love doing these. I think there's a lot of fun. I appreciate everyone's questions. And again, in the future, if you just like think about something like something I, Gabe, or someone else said in the chat, like suddenly makes you think of something, and you're like, oh, I should have asked about that. Definitely, please tag me in the appropriate channels, and I'm happy to answer your questions. And happy to talk with you there. More than happy to, more than just these in-person discussions. Like I'm always happy to try to work through some questions with you.
And shout out to Anna for being our audience coordinator tonight. You did a wonderful job. Also, shout out to Guest Cat. That's my brother. He's the one who actually records all of these sessions and then runs them through the workflow that we have so we can get those timestamp chapters and get everything in the appropriate channel for you guys. So shout out to everyone involved. We will be back again tomorrow night with Office Hours. That's going to be Mike Olbinski and Phil Johnson from Stormfront Freaks making his debut with Storm Chaser Coaching. He's going to be the host for that show. So really exciting. We've got some awesome people that are on board with Storm Chaser Coaching. And then, like I said, Thursday, we've got me and Trey talking about Storm Feature Identification. That's a premium only, so it'll be the smaller, more close-knit group like it was tonight. And yeah, take care, everyone. See you later.